Oh, it's nice to have the Alleluia back and to finally have spring weather. But there is something missing today. The women who had accompanied Jesus from Galilee entered the tomb, but they did not find the body of the Lord. Instead, they saw two men in dazzling garments. Remember on the second Sunday of Lent, when Jesus went up the mountain, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. And suddenly, two men, Moses and Elijah, were seen talking to Jesus. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was to accomplish at Jerusalem. And now, outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem, the two men in dazzling white ask us why we are looking for the living among the dead. He is not here. He has been raised. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And they remembered his words. In the other Easter Gospels, we're told to go to Galilee, where the risen Lord, who goes ahead of us, will meet us there. But the two men in dazzling garments direct us not forward, but rather backward. Remember. Jesus, remember me. Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Do this in memory of me. Remember the disciples on the road to Emmaus who said to the stranger, "Stay with us." And when he sat at table, he took bread, blessed, broke it, and gave it to them, and their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. Last night at the Easter Vigil, we remembered and told again an ancient story where God opened up a way where there was no way, and the children of Israel marched dry-shod through the sea. And in hearing that story once again, we realized this is our story, and it's happening to us today. We began this Holy Week with the church roof of Notre Dame Cathedral of Paris in flames. 1,300 wooden beams form the forest that was destroyed in the fire. Some of those trees date back to the year 800. The building itself took 200 years to complete and has stood intact more than 800 years. As French President Emmanuel Macron remarked, Notre Dame is our history, our literature, part of our psyche, the place of all our great events, our epidemics, our wars, our liberations, the epicenter of our lives. But this wasn't always the case. In 1831, when Victor Hugo wrote Notre Dame de Paris, which we know better by the English translation, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the cathedral was in a state of horrific despair. Its architecture was considered old-fashioned. It was largely neglected, and it was vandalized. In fact, Hugo ends the preface of Hunchback with the dark prediction that, quote, "The church will perhaps itself soon disappear from the face of the earth." But instead, the church was saved. And it was the book, the novel, which became a smash hit. Popular attention turned back to the church. And in 1844, the king ordered a restoration. As Joni Mitchell reminds us, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? And so the world has decided to save Notre Dame. This treasure is Our Lady. She belongs to all of us. Another of my favorite cathedrals is in Cologne Germany. It suffered minor damage during the war, but there are other churches nearby, especially this one on the left side of the picture, which was completely destroyed. The church of St. Martin the Great was reduced to rubble. The structure was rebuilt, as you see, as it had been before. But the inside of the church was kept very spare. The new windows were commissioned, and they were more muted in color, almost like black and white pictures, photographs. So instead of trying to replicate the building as it had once been, the restored church tells the story of its history. It remembers the experience of destruction in the structure that we see today. The late church historian and theologian Jaroslav Pelikan said, "Tradition is the living faith of the dead." In contrast, traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. Tradition lives in conversation with the past, while remembering where we are and when we are. When the risen Lord appears to the disciples who are locked in the upper room, the wounds of his torture in his hands and feet and his side are still there. But there's a difference. They no longer bear the burden of death. Instead, they've become a source of life. The experience of revelation makes of us, as St. Paul says, a new creation. It brings us to a new place. It's a place we could not reach by ourselves. As Christians, we often hear the adage, we should forgive and forget. But we can never forget what happens to us, because to forget is to deny part of our own memory, a part of our own reality. It's being asked to have violence done to us again. But we can remember in a new way. The two main beams of our church intersect right here in the center of the church, and we meet here under the cross, Sunday after Sunday. The image is repeated on top of the altar. The two main beams intersect, and then the four pillars that hold up the beams are represented here in inlaid burl walnut. The burl wood of the tree is caused when the tree experiences some form of stress. So what could have been destruction has been transformed. And now we remember and see it in a new way. St. Paul reminds us that we have died, and our life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, your life, appears, then you too will appear with him in glory. Standing under the cross, we remember in a new way. The cross becomes the place of glory, a place of transformation and new life.